Mark Andrews injured in the Ravens Thursday night win over the Cincinnati Bengals, likely done for the season with a serious ankle injury. Is it Gronk time in Baltimore? We talk about that and so much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube and anywhere you get your audio podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are back 5 days a week, Locked On Ravens, starting off another one. No Victory Monday because we already celebrated it on Friday. It was Victory Friday. The Ravens beating the Bengals in Week 11 to move the record 8-3, and it was a pretty dominant effort, all things considered. Injuries galore for both the Ravens and the Bengals. We'll be talking about it all today, but I'm excited for this one. We're going to talk about kind of a crazy headline to this show. Rob Gronkowski. For those who don't know, Mark Andrews suffered a likely season-ending injury on Thursday against the Bengals. So we're going to talk about if it's a Gronk time in Baltimore. I'm so excited for this. We're also going to get into Ravens and Bengals takeaways. Feels like forever since we talked about that game. So we'll be diving into that in the second part of the show. Then we'll get a little bit more in-depth into the Mark Andrews injury. John Harbaugh will probably provide more updates during his media availability. But for what we know at this point, we'll get into that. So again, 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens. You can subscribe in audio form or video form. Either way, you're not missing out on our content. It's the same show, both in audio and video form. We bring you Ravens news, analysis, updates, game recaps. We do live shows after every Ravens game, every piece of Ravens big news. So Ravens-centric over here. You can subscribe for all your Ravens coverage and the best of the Ravens content. I appreciate all the support. Whether it's audio form, video form, social media, we're building here. Just hit 1 million views on the YouTube channel a couple days ago. That was awesome. So thank you so much for everything, for listening, whether you're an everydayer, it's your first time in, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle. Thank you so much. So let's get into it. Rob Gronkowski. It's going to be a crazy segment here because look, Rob Gronkowski would be the storyline probably of the year for the Ravens. And that's even, Lamar Jackson's contract. We talked about that all during 2023. It was the biggest storyline, but Rob Gronkowski coming out of effective retirement to play with the Ravens will be probably the craziest. And it's interesting because the Ravens with Mark Andrews going down, Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar are your two that have to step up. But then you have Travis Vokolek on the practice squad. Now, I'm a big Travis Vokolek guy, but do the Ravens feel confident in 2 second-year guys and a rookie in that tight end room, or would they want? Are they going to bring back Eric Tomlinson? I don't think that's necessarily a needle-moving move. He's more of a blocking tight end. We've seen Eric Tomlinson in a Ravens uniform. But the free agent tight ends right now, it's not anything to write home about. We talked about it a bit on Friday's show after the Bengals game. Adam Shaheen is a guy, I'd probably say Cameron Brate from the Buccaneers is probably the best. But his teammate in Tampa for a little bit, Rob Gronkowski, it's so crazy. He last played in 2021 with Tampa, obviously spent 2 years in Tampa with Tom Brady, and he retired but then came back. So he had already done the whole retirement comeback thing. Now we know Rob Gronkowski is one of the best tight ends in NFL history. He's he did at least put together a career of almost 10,000 receiving yards. He had 621 receptions for 9,286 yards, 92 touchdowns in his career. Now, obviously the thing with Gronk was injuries. His body was definitely slowing down and breaking down over the latter part of his career. And to bring him in, we're entering week 12 now for the Ravens. Do I think this is going to happen? No. I mean, the short answer is no. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Baltimore probably feels okay with their tight end room. It'd be interesting if it did, though. I think it at least warrants the conversation of having it Because there's always the question of, do the Ravens want to trust their youth right now, or do they want to maybe bring in a veteran that could bring that game experience and the veteran leadership and the Super Bowl championship experience? But in reality, I think what Baltimore's going to do here is Isaiah Likely is going to move up into the Mark Andrews role. Charlie Kolar moves up to Isaiah Likely. They promote Travis Vokolek from the practice squad. But if it's Gronk, then how does he kind of fit in? Because then you have weapons all across the board. And look, the Ravens have not been shy about bringing in very experienced veterans over the past couple of years later in the season. Des Bryant comes in as a later addition to that team when things weren't really working wide receiver wise for them in 2021. We saw last year with injuries, Deshaun Jackson, they signed out of nowhere pretty much. Deshaun Jackson to a deal. Now, again, Rob Gronkowski is effectively retired, right? He has dipped his hand into multiple different things. He's done the media thing, the announcing, et cetera, et cetera. He's in a lot of different things right now. So who says he even wants to play again if Baltimore comes calling and he says, well, I don't really know. But the key here is going to be Isaiah Likely and to a lesser extent, Charlie Kolar, right? Those are going to be the guys that are going to have to step up. And even if a Gronk were to come in, or you want to take another free agent tight end like a Cam Brate or Adam Shaheen or whoever, Likely is going to be the one that all the eyes are on, that all the pressure is on to take over that Andrews role, because we saw the flashes and we saw the potential. Likely can do some of the things Mark Andrews can do, but he is definitely not Mark Andrews. There is no replacing Mark Andrews in this offense. This is a big loss. It's a really big loss for the Ravens. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that. There are ways the Ravens can adjust their offense. There are ways their scheme can kind of be adjusted by Todd Monken and the personnel they roll out there. For example, with Andrews and Likely, you say, all right, yeah, 2 tight end sets, that works. But how many 2 tight end sets do you want to roll out with Likely and Kolar? Do you want to maybe put 4 wideouts on the field? Do you want to put Likely in the slot with 3 wideouts on the flight? Do you want to run a bunch of 2 tight end sets? I don't think this means Baltimore's going to stop running the ball, obviously, and stop using their pure heavy personnel. But we're going to have to see, because Likely has been inconsistent as a blocker. And I say it whenever I can with Andrews, is he has shaped himself. Didn't come into the league out of Oklahoma as a good blocker. He shaped himself into a good blocker. Likely, I think, is somewhat on his way, but he's not there yet. So they're going to lose some receiving ability, lose some blocking ability. With Gronk, though, what is he going to be? Like, where would he be body-wise? What is his body even at right now? I don't even, for him, would it be a snap count type of thing? Would he be in a specific role? Is it even worth doing that for them? It'd be one heck of a storyline. It'd be fun to have Gronk in Baltimore. It's so funny because I posted right after the game, I posted must have been 10 minutes, like a 10-minute highlight video of Rob Gronkowski. And these are my favorite tweets. If you've been with me, if you're an everydayer, you know this. But when these veteran people get brought up, or when someone gets signed and, he was really good, had all these highlights, all pro, 8-10 years ago, I'll post those highlights from 8-10 years ago and be like, oh, the Ravens are getting a dog and they're getting this guy. And so I said, what if the Ravens got this Rob Gronkowski? It was Patriots highlights from 8 years ago. And people just say, I was in middle school when this happened. I was just all this stuff. It's so funny. And people know what I'm doing, and I'm trying to, it's a joke, right? It's a joke. There is, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a 0% chance that it happens, but I would say it's highly unlikely that Rob Gronkowski comes to Baltimore. Some free agents, yeah, it'd be interesting. Maybe an Ndamukong Suh comes in still, but we're getting later and later into the season. And of course, injuries can play a part. And for Andrews, there is a conversation to be had about how much youth do you want to trust, and do you have enough trust in Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar and, I'd assume Travis Vokolek to stay in that room and pick up the slack as best as they can for Andrews. I think there's a case for it, but what if it doesn't work out? Then do you maybe call Cam Brate or Shaheen, or maybe you make that call to Gronk and you offer, I don't even know what you'd offer him at this point, but maybe it's just something they have on the back burner. But is it Gronk time in Baltimore? I'd say probably not. I'd say probably. I think you're rolling with Likely, rolling with Kolar, rolling with Vokolek. You maybe bring back Tomlinson, who was just released from the practice squad. And at this point, that's probably, continuity-wise, at least for the guys who've been in the system, the best option. But Likely's going to have to step up, and Kolar's going to have to step up, and those are the 2 guys who I think everybody's going to be watching here. So Unfortunately, for those who maybe want Gronkowski, I'm going to say it's a no. I'm going to say Baltimore would just say, yeah, we like our guys, as Buck Showalter said, and that's going to be their path, at least in my opinion. Coming up in the second part of the show, I'll be talking about some Ravens and Bengals takeaways from that game on Thursday night, so be sure to stay tuned. Plan to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And these days, every potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs help to find the right people for your team faster and for free. And I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, finding jobs, looking for jobs. It's an awesome place to find some jobs. And it's really easy to create a few job posts over on LinkedIn Jobs too. All you have to do is add your job on the profile hashtag hiring fan your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They have simple tools you can use over there, like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates just the right skills and experience. You completely prioritize who would like to interview and who would like to hire. And it's really important to both start and end the year strong. And the right team member might be able to help you do that. That's why small businesses are right. LinkedIn Jobs number one, delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is finding the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Push your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to push your job for free. Some conditions apply. We're back. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker still talking with you here on this Monday. Talked about Rob Gronkowski a little bit. It was a fun conversation. Let's get into some general Ravens and Bengals takeaways from the game on Thursday. And again, feels like forever since we talked about it. The game happened on Thursday, did the live show, did the Friday show, and now we're back here on Monday talking about it a little more. 34-20 in favor of the Ravens. Baltimore moves to 8-3, while Cincinnati falls to 5-5. You want to talk about other AFC North implications on Sunday? Well, the Browns and the Steelers matched up, and the Browns beat the Steelers. So I'd say probably a good result for the Ravens. Now, the Browns did sign Ravens legend Joe Flacco, or they're expected to sign him, I think, on Monday to their practice squad. So it kind of hurts the heart a little bit to see January Joe, Cool Joe, go to a division rival of the Ravens. But Ravens and Browns are done playing this year unless they meet in the playoffs, and obviously January Joe is a thing, so that'd be kind of an interesting matchup to watch with the Browns defense, but I think it's better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But regardless, Ravens and Bengals, it was a game of injuries, honestly. It was a wacky, wild game, as most Thursday night games are. Lamar Jackson finishes this one 16-26 for 264 and 2 touchdowns through the air. He also had 9 for 54 on the ground. But he got dinged up too. We talked about Mark Andrews and his injury, and we'll talk about it a little more in the final part of the show too, just the specifics and everything. But for Lamar, he got injured, and it was actually Logan Wilson on all three of the Ravens' big injuries, which was Mark, Lamar, and Odell. So, Logan Wilson got a lot of fire for the hits that he provided to the Ravens on Thursday night. But I was surprised at how Lamar looked after the injury. And I'm not saying, in like a good way. Like I did not expect him to have the mobility he had on that injury. He looked like he was really ailing, really struggling. We saw the limp, but he did a good job of kind of just, I guess, dealing with the pain and making sure that he willed his team to a win. On the run throws, was running. He got hit and came up limping really hard. I can't remember when exactly. It was later in the game. Next play was a QB draw, which I kind of questioned that from Todd Monken, but I guess is what it is. And he did it. He ran and looked fine. Now, we're going to kind of have to monitor over the course of the week, maybe the rest of the season, how that injury is for Lamar. I don't think, obviously, he's 100%. It's probably going to take a little while to heal from that. Obviously, it's not the Andrews ankle injury, but it's an injury that, again, you don't want to have linger. You don't want to have get worse. So I'm sure the Ravens maybe will keep it cautious throughout the week as they load up on that Sunday night game against the Los Angeles Chargers, where they got to travel out to LA too. So that'll be interesting. Gus Edwards, the Gus Bus continues to find the end zone, 12 for 62 for Gus Edwards, which again, he's just been in the end zone all year this year. Keaton Mitchell got more touches in this one. Thank everything for that. He had 8 for 33, had an electric 21-yard run. But I think the thing for me, and this is where the wackiness of the game comes in, the highlight of the game was Keaton Mitchell running with Zay Flowers and throwing blocks and just effort on a play that got called back due to a ridiculous holding call on Odell Beckham Jr., which was the tickiest of tackiest calls. Shouldn't have been called whatsoever. But that was effort. He runs and throws blocks for Zay Flowers, gets him into the end zone. And again, should have been a touchdown. Should have been Zay Flowers, his first touchdown in America. He hasn't scored in America. He scored in London, scored abroad, but has not scored on U.S. soil. So that's a storyline to watch. But Odell Beckham had his first 100-yard game since 2021. 4 for 116, 29 yards a catch for Odell, including a 51-yard deep pass from Lamar Jackson. Lamar missed a couple deep balls early, but connected with Odell on a big one late. So hopefully that kind of gets his confidence going, gets him back in the groove of the whole deep ball thing. I mentioned Zay. He had 3 for 43. Nelson Aguilar, right place, right time, touchdown. Jermaine Pratt, and all the drama with Jermaine Pratt after. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Pratt made a great play. Got to give him credit for that. But the ball falls right into the hands of Nelson Aguilar, who walks into the end zone with his speed for a touchdown. Mark Andrews, before going out, had 2 for 23. Charlie Cola, 1 for 13. Rashad Bateman got in on the touchdown action for his first touchdown of the year. Very well deserved for him. On the defensive side of the ball, stop me if you heard this one before. Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith both led the team. Patrick Queen with 11, Roquan Smith with 10. Then you have Marcus Williams with 7. But then you have the guys getting involved in the sack department. The Ravens and the sacks have been awesome. 5 total on the day here. Ravens had 48 sacks all of 2022. They're at 44 right now. Through 11 weeks of 2023, they should be able to break their 2022 total, if not next week in week 14 against the Rams. Matabike had a sack. Oweh had a sack. Tavius Robinson gets the first sack of his career. Kyle Van Noy gets a sack. Jadeveon Clowney gets a sack. It's the usual suspects, I would say, plus an appearance from Tavius Robinson. So it was a great day for the Ravens defense. Now, it wasn't a great start, though. Joe Burrow did walk the defense down a little bit, but Burrow gets injured after throwing a touchdown pass to Joe Mixon. The play before Jadeveon Clowney kind of lands on his wrist. There's a bunch of controversy with the whole Burrow wrist conversation. But then Jake Browning comes in. The Ravens defense does what they're supposed to do at that point, right? Browning throws, I think it was, one career pass before this game. And at that point, you say, look, if you're the Ravens, you're just going to go out there and try to confuse them, try to put pressure on him, and don't let him beat you deep. You know it's going to be the short passing game. You know it's going to be a heavy dose of Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon torched the Ravens early in this game. But once Burrow went out, I think the Ravens realized that Mixon is really their only weapon, especially if Browning can't get the ball to Jamar Chase. And at the end of the day, Jamar Chase played 2 Marlon Humphrey-less Ravens matchups and finished with 7 for 43 and a touchdown. So major credit to Brandon Stevens for his play. On the day for the Bengals, at least, Joe Mixon, again, I mentioned 16 for 69, 4.3. Tanner Hudson was the leading Bengals receiver, though, with 4 for 49. Trenton Irwin made a couple of plays. Mixon had 5 catches. He led the Bengals in receptions. But overall, I think that the Ravens did what they were supposed to do. Would it be a different game with Joe Burrow? I mean, sure. I mean, it was definitely a factor. I'm not saying it wasn't. But there were injuries both ways, and unfortunately, that's just how it goes. There's controversy about the hip drop tackles, and we saw another one in college football, which caused a really gruesome injury. So I'm sure it's going to be a conversation point, despite the restrictions defenders already have here. Football's unfortunate, and sometimes plays like that happen. And we saw the Ravens defenders talk. Patrick Queen, Marcus Williams saying, what else are we supposed to do as defenders? It's unfortunate it happened, and obviously prayers to Mark Andrews, but it's just part of the game. I'm paraphrasing. It's not exactly what they said, but they were kind of like, well, as defenders, what are we supposed to do, essentially? And then we saw the Jermaine Pratt drama where Patrick Queen was talking, and the Jermaine Pratt said, 9 was out, Joe Burrow was out, and then Patrick Queen got to talking a little bit, and Patrick Ricard got involved. So some Ravens and Bengals Twitter or X drama there, but Baltimore gets the win. They sweep the Bengals, essentially eliminate the Bengals' AFC North chances, and I think the Ravens are firmly in the driver's seat for that division, which we'll talk about later as the week goes on. So we'll see what ends up happening. But the Ravens, they pulled a win, and it was one that they definitely needed to bounce back from that Cleveland loss. I do not want to imagine the discourse if the Ravens had lost that game after losing to Cleveland. So I'm glad they didn't. We can talk about a win and not a loss. But coming up in the final part of the show, we will dive more into Mark Andrews and that injury, what it means for his season and maybe even long-term career. So be sure to stay tuned, plenty to talk about on the show. First, this episode is brought to you by DoorDash, and I'm a big food guy. I do love food, and sometimes during a game, I'll be watching, there'll be a timeout, or maybe it'll go to halftime and I want some food. So I'll go get something, but there's nothing there. There's nothing good to eat. So that means I know it's time to order in with DoorDash. And there are plenty of ways you can go with DoorDash. If you want the classic game day package, your pizza, your wings, soda, burgers, DoorDash has that for you. Or if you're a big snack guy, you can order some chips, some dips, some nachos. Maybe you want to make your own. You can get everything you need to make your own nachos on DoorDash and get it all delivered to you without missing the game. You can get 50% off of a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Exchange terms apply. In the Baltimore area, there are a ton of options, right? Sushi Hana's a great place. Maybe you want pizza. You got underground pizza. You can get prepared before game day. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash and get ready to watch your team win. There's 50% off of the $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Exchange terms apply. Don't forget to use code LOCK23 for 50% off of the $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Separate exchange terms apply. We're back here. It's our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I appreciate you for tuning in here, whether you're in audio form with us or in video form with us. Thank you so much. It's really, it means a lot. You can follow along. We do content 5 days a week, plus more, obviously, during the season with the live streams. And it's been awesome to build up these communities, audio form, video form, social media. So be sure to follow along for the ride. Keep it Locked On Ravens. But let's talk about Mark Andrews and his injury again. Suffers that pretty brutal ankle injury in the first quarter. Logan Wilson essentially with the hip drop tackle, which it's essentially, for those who don't know, it's a body weight tackle. So Wilson kind of wraps up and then puts the body weight and kind of leans down, and Andrews, his ankle gets caught up, and Wilson kind of falls on it a little bit. You can see it kind of drag also, and just goes down immediately, writhing in pain. Some people thought he had a neck injury because he was kind of, his hands were going up and everything, but he ends up walking off very gingerly, I think it was, and walks to the locker room very gingerly. And we hear from John Harbaugh after the game that it's likely a season-ending ankle injury, a very severe one. Then we get an update from Ian Rappaport on Friday about the specifics of the injury, saying that Mark Andrews suffered a cracked fibula and an ankle ligament injury. So that's still believed, of course, to be a long-term injury. And that usually, and again, I am no doctor, so please do not, I'm just going based off of what I know and from what I've talked to people about and what I've heard. So what that means is you're out for probably 2 to 3 months at least, with the recovery tacked onto that. Sometimes that does require surgery depending on how severe it is. And you have to figure it's kind of like the ligament injury, but I would not expect him back at all this season. I'm sure John Harbaugh will announce it during his media availability. But with the ligament injury, that's kind of the more, because the cracked fibula is going to heal on its own. And when you kind of look up the timelines, they vary. It can be, it's 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. But there have been some who have said, well, those types of injuries, some can just come back and boom. And it's the same with all serious injuries. Now, the ACL recovery, the Achilles recoveries, the MCLs, kind of those ligament tears in the knee and leg. The science has been great to evolve to the point where ACL injuries used to be like year-long, at least, injuries. But now that timeline has kind of been shifted to 9 to 12 months instead of maybe 12 to 16. And the cracked fibula, the ligament injury, again, depends how severe it actually is. But some have said that maybe it'll hinder some explosiveness, but I think that's rare from what I've seen. That's pretty rare in cases like this. But it all depends on the recovery, right? We saw Ronnie Stanley suffer his brutal ankle injury. That took multiple years to come back from. I'm not saying this is the same situation, and I know it's not. But it depends on the recovery of the player, how the body heals, and everything else that was how severe was the injury to start, and are there any other underlying things that happened with the injury. So if I'm the Ravens, and with what their approach has been, their approach with these injuries has been, we're playing it on the safe side. And if Andrews has that severe injury, obviously he does, and it's anywhere from, let's just say, a month and a half to 3 months, right? Let's just call it that timeline. And that's before the recovery and before the rehab and everything. Depending on what that timeline is, if it's a month and a half to 3 months, the Ravens are probably saying, we're just going to be cautious with it, not rush them back, which has been what they've done with players like Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Ronnie Stanley and Nick Boyle, right? All these players, you can go across the way, talk about offense, defense, whatever you want to say. The Ravens have shifted, and I don't know if shifted is the right word actually, but I guess shifted their approach to be, look, we really need to keep it cautious with these guys and be cautious with these players to make sure that there are no long-term effects. And that's what I would want. If you have the opportunity to bring back Mark Andrews in the playoffs at 70 or 65%, I'm personally not doing it. It hurts, right? Because he's such a big part of your offense. Arguably the player you could not lose on your offensive side of the ball, not named Lamar Jackson. He is the most important offensive player, not named Lamar Jackson, arguably. You can throw a couple of names in that conversation, maybe Tyler Linderbaum, or, you can go a couple different directions. But Andrews means a lot, but bringing him back at 65 or 70% in the playoffs, if that's what it's going to be, I wouldn't do that personally. That's not what I would do. I would make sure there are no long-term effects. You have him healthy for the start of 2024, and you go from there. Because what happens if Andrews comes back and gets injured and it's a more severe injury this time, or it re-aggravates, and it's not only a longer recovery time because of that, but it's longer-term effects, maybe ones that will impact him for the remainder of his career. So I would assume Baltimore keeps it very cautious with Mark Andrews, especially because they know how important he is to their future. It's not just a present thing for them, right? Obviously, it's very important what they do on offense. He and Lamar have that connection. We've talked about the loss it is going to be for this team. They're going to have to adjust. They're going to have to kind of change around what they do a little bit, and that's to be expected. But I personally, maybe it's different. Maybe John Harbaugh gives us a different update, but I haven't heard him talk since the game, so we'll see. But if I had to predict, I would say Mark Andrews is not back this season and comes back in 2024. And that's what, if the injury is severe and it's going to take that long recovery time, I'm not rushing him back at this point. We're almost to December now. We're past the middle of November, almost to Thanksgiving. And it's tough to lose a guy like that this late in the year, because you're thinking, well, if it happens early in the season, he can come back and, maybe it'll be like a December thing, but we're not. We're 3 months into the year essentially almost. And Andrews, I don't think is coming back. So tough loss for the Ravens offense. They can survive it. I'm not saying their season's over. They have ways to survive it. The season is not doomed. Don't get me wrong. But they're going to have guys like Likely step up and Kohler step up. The receivers are going to have to take on more of a burden as well. So it's kind of a trickle-down effect for everybody. But I'm sure we'll get some more specifics from John Harbaugh, not only on Mark Andrews, but on Lamar, on Odell. We'll see how much. I know sometimes you can kind of play it close to the vest. But should be interesting to hear what John Harbaugh has to say on all that. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. Be sure again to subscribe, like this video on YouTube, subscribe in audio form as well. Tell a friend, tell a family member. You can also subscribe over on Subtext for more exclusive Ravens conversation, especially one-on-one text conversations over there. We'll be right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens. Of course, talking more Ravens football. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.